Hey guys, what's happening? I'm George, the J and MJs.
Hey everybody, Mitch here, the M and MJs. Welcome back to our podcast. Today we're going to be taking you through some more of the marijuana fundamentals booklet that we have and that we offer here in store. And specifically today we're going to be talking about some of our favorites, flower, my personal favorite, and how we do different assessments. So I know everyone's personal preference and flavor is a little bit different, and so we're going to talk about some of the different ways you're going to want to look at and evaluate flower as a whole, but really this is about understanding you and your personal preferences and what works best for you as an individual consumer.
So some of the subjects we've put on here are sight. So when you first look at the bud, the first thing you're going to think about is how it looks. So colors can vary from light green, orange to dark purple. They can change, depending on the plant, depending on how it's cultivated. You can really bring out some different colors in that. Some of the colors you don't want to see is like brown, black, stuff that just looks like it's either old or it could be moldy or things like that. Generally speaking, in the Massachusetts dispensaries, you're not going to see mold, this stringent testing and stuff, but you never know. Things could happen that weren't planned for.
Yep. Again, like you said, generally greens, all different shades, light greens, darker greens, purples, oranges. You may see some white crystals in there, and that's really what you're looking for is that fresh look and feel. Obviously, if you have the ability to, when you do purchase the buds, feel it, and we'll get into some of that as well.
So when you're looking at it, you see it. Trichome presence is the next thing on our list here, so there'll be more or less of that depending on the TAC or the total active cannabinoids. From there, we have different...
So hold on, George. Why don't you describe a trichome and what that is for some folks that maybe out there don't know or aren't familiar with that terminology?
Okay, so trichome is the part of the plant, it's a gland that excretes the chemicals inside the plant. So it'll have all those total active cannabinoids in it. It'll have all the different cannabinoids, the terpenes. It's contained within those. And it's like a sticky, resinous stuff that grows out of the plant. When you harvest the plant fresh, it's really, really sticky. Once it dries out and you get that finished flower, it's not as sticky. You can't notice it as much, but you can definitely notice if you roll up like a hash ball, your fingers are sticking to each other.
So when we're doing our flower assessment, we have flower in front of us and we're looking at it. What exactly are you looking for to identify this has trichomes? Can you
right, so it looks like a white crystally substance that's on the flower. It can almost drown out the plant matter. It's so dense.
Yeah,
it looks like a blanket.
So that white crystally coating that you're going to see on those buds on that flower is really what you're looking for there, and that's what we mean by that trichome.
Yeah.
Thanks, George. Appreciate you taking some time and breaking that down for a simpleton like me.
You got it, man. So, and then we go into different classifications of bud size, and by that we mean like how big or small the bud is, or if it is even a bud at all. It could be like trim. It's so small, it's like powdery. But we have A, B, C, and trim. So A is the biggest. Trim would be trim. C is the lowest. It's the smallest bud. You'd see that in like pre-rolls and stuff like that.
Yeah, so all the flower that you're going to see in store here is all going to be A and B bud. It's all premium quality flower that we purchase, and beyond that, the partnerships that we have in place allow us to provide the highest and the most premium quality products to our customers and guests that come into the store. So you'll only see A and B bud here, certainly. A lot of times the smaller buds are used for pre-rolls, the trim and things like that. That's oftentimes what it's used for, as well as for being processed into those concentrates, edibles, and all those other infused products that we love.
Generally speaking, you'll see the C buds be the pre-rolls, and then all the trim would go to concentrates and stuff like that, so you wouldn't have to worry about that. Next here we have stem to flower ratios. You don't want to get an eighth and just have a bunch of stems in there that are weighing out you're losing flower there. So that's not something you want to see a lot of.
And I think we've all, been in those situations in past days. And again, certainly now that we have a legal market and things are more regulated, it's not as big of a concern. Certainly is something to be aware of when you're looking at it, evaluating different flower, though, is that ratio, how much of what the plant matter I'm looking at is stem versus consumable buds that we're actually trying to take home and use.
Right, the stuff that's worth the money.
Certainly,
what you're paying so much for.
Certainly worth it to make sure you're aware of that ratio and what that looks like. And you're going to find stems in all buds, but the idea is that the majority of that plant matter should be bud, fresh, consumable flammable material.
And some people prefer the smaller buds because they have smaller stems in them. You know, you get one big cola and it has a bigger stem through the middle of it. Some people don't like that. They prefer to have the smaller buds.
Smaller buds you can throw right into the grinder and grind up those stems, and you might not even notice that in your
it's not clogging up your grinder.
Whereas if you try to grind up a big stem, especially if you're rolling with it, it's going to cause issues in the future, and we'll certainly get to that in later podcasts. But it's important to, again, just be aware of that ratio and how much stem is in whatever you're consuming.
So our next subject here in our flower evaluation is contaminants. Things like, anything that could have come in contact with that from, growing all the way through production and packaging. Like hairs, you don't want to see hairs, or, unwanted packaging or plastics or stuff like that. Generally speaking, that's not going to happen, but, as a rule of thumb, you don't want to leave anything unturned.
Yeah, but it's certainly something to be aware of if you are finding these things in any products.
And contaminants could also be like mold and stuff like that. Very rare. I don't expect to see that in anybody's eighths out there, but
again, something to be aware of when you're looking at and evaluating flowers, to make sure that those contaminants aren't in there. And again, because we're providing premium products, we shouldn't have that issue here, but certainly an important point to be aware of when you're making those evaluations of your flower.
When we made this, we were thinking from back in the day, you might see like a beetle in there or something like that, and, but we don't have to deal with that anymore.
Yeah, masks and the testing procedures, we don't have any of that these days. But certainly, I think in our past lives, prior to this wonderful legal market, we certainly had more of those issues, and certainly that's where I think our heads were at when we were putting that into the booklet. So we'll continue on. What's next?
Next, we got Manicure Quality. So when you get flowers straight off the plant, of course, they have to go through a dry trim process and they have to be packaged. So along with that, making sure that the quality of the manicure of the plant has been good. You don't want to have a bunch of leaves in there. You don't want to have what they call crow's feet. Mm-hmm. It'd be like if you cut off most of the leaf, but you left the stem sticking out, and it looks like a little crow's foot. It's really funny. You'll see that someday.
And so it's very important. Again, the products that we're working with here all are high quality. Many of our vendors do hand trim, and it's by human eye, so that quality of trim should be very high with all the products that you see in our store here. But certainly a very valid point to evaluate. There are many different ways. There's machine trimming, there's hand trimming, and that can come in different levels. So when you're looking at and evaluating the flower that's in front of you, it's important to look at and understand the quality of that trim. Make sure you're bringing home those most premium buds that you can.
Yeah, the more bud, the less trim, the more you get the bang for your buck. So next, we're going to move into the density and shape retention of the bud itself. That goes to speak something about fluffiness or density of the bud. Mm-hmm. Some people like a lot harder nugget where they grab it and it's really dense, whereas some people like a little more fluffier of a bud where you grab it, it's a little more sponge-like.
Depends on the time of day sometimes, right? I think that there's different preferences for different folks, different strokes for different folks, if you will. And everyone kind of has their own preferences on what they're looking for and evaluating in that area, especially as something that it really comes down to preference. But it certainly an important factor in terms of evaluating what flower is in front of you, and the quality of that is how dense, what's the shape? Does it look like a naturally formed bud? Is it manicured correctly as well? Where you're not getting these crow's feet or these extra leaves sticking out, and it's truly in the shape and the form of the bud that it should be. And so you'll see a lot of that. And like George said, as you squeeze it, it should have some spring to it. That will, again, depend on how dense that bud is, but it should always have some give and some spring to an extent.
Right, depending on the moisture content, which is our next subject, it could change that drastically. If it's really dried out and it's dense and you grab it, it could just crumble into nothing. Whereas if it's got that stickiness, it kind of hasn't decayed or deteriorated as much. It'll keep that shape and it won't just crumble into dust.
And it'll spring right back to that same shape. And It's very important. Moisture content is certainly an important factor. Generally speaking, Massachusetts, especially this time of year in the winter, we have fairly dry flower.
Yeah.
It's a consequence of the environment that we're in and the fact that we're always pumping dry heat into all of our facilities to keep us as humans warm. The fact is that dries out the environment that we exist in.
Right, and then vice versa with the summertime, you're fighting the humidity in New England. Exactly the opposite, and it can be 80 to 100% for months out of the year. And you'll see an opposite effect during the summertime. you might get a little bit more moisture than you want in your bud. It might be a little harder to grind up.